Welcome to Flicks and Giggles.
My name is Avia.
And my name is Izzy.
And today we're coming to you with Emerald Fennell's new movie, Saltburn.
Saltburn.
Oh! Okay, before we get into all our reviews and everything, this movie is set in the year 2006, mid-smack in the middle of Y2K. We follow a character named Oliver who's starting at Oxford, and he sort of forms a friendship / obsession with his classmate Felix, who is a British aristocrat. And then we see the progression of their friendship, and it leads to Oliver spending a summer at Felix's family estate called Saltburn, where things get
Weird.
Very weird. Yeah.
What's your rating?
I give it like a 9.5, like teetering onto like a 10. I'm like tipping.
I am going to give it an 8.
Okay.
A solid 8.
Okay.
A strong 8.
I feel like we're still generous with our pointings.
Pointings?
Our ratings?
It's been a rough day.
It really has.
I think so, but no, I think this movie just has a lot of layers.
It does.
Has a lot of depth.
Mm-hmm.
And it deserves... It's interesting, we were looking at other people's reviews, as we do. We kind of like see what other people are saying about it. And really, when you are looking at like Rotten Tomato, whatever, it's either a 5-star or it is a 1-star.
Yeah.
Like people are loving this movie or people are hating this movie.
And there's no in-between. And I really don't think there can be an in-between, because it gives you such strong feelings right from the go.
Yeah.
It puts you in so many different states where you feel bad for certain characters, and then in another scene you're uncomfortable by what they're doing, and then you're laughing at them or with them, and it really guides you through a lot.
Yeah.
Through the movie.
Well, and like, not to be a pretentious asshole, but like, you either kind of get it or you don't. You know?
You get it or you just don't.
Like, I know I sound like a dick saying that, but well, it also totally depends if you're into that kind of... It's a very specific niche of movie that I think if you're into it, you're either into it or you are absolutely not into it.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with it.
Yeah. And we can talk you through our takes, and you can decide if you get it or if you are into it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, spoiler free. What did we think?
I loved the cinematography. I think taking out everything and we're just talking about visuals, it is a beautiful film.
Mm-hmm.
Even in scenes where it was really uncomfortable and messed up, like the gravesite scene, it was still visually stunning.
Mm-hmm.
And you couldn't hate it. The color grading was beautiful. I think a wardrobe itself was also so good.
Mm-hmm.
Like Venetia's outfits, I loved. All of the British aristocrats, their outfits, there was just something particular about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you're in college and how everyone dressed, like there's I don't remember his name, but he's the math genius.
Oh yeah, I don't know, but yeah.
I loved his outfits. Like every time I was like, it's so spot on.
Yeah.
And it was just so good. And you can tell there was just so much attention to detail. And then you add the layer of like the acting. Everyone committed.
Everyone.
Committed.
Yes.
Fully.
Yes.
And then you add the layer of like storytelling, the direction. And I just think it was surprising because some of it was so outrageous, but also there wasn't such a thing as like a plot twist, because she sets you up so perfectly that when things click, it makes sense, and you're like, I get it.
Yeah. Well, and they absolutely could have done it in a way where it was a plot twist. If they didn't set it up the way they did. It could have been a plot twist, but I'm kind of glad they didn't do it that way.
Me too.
It would have been a completely different movie.
Yes.
If it was unexpected.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I like that it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
My con is pretty much the same thing as yours. So you wanna?
Yeah, great. Okay. Huge fan of the cinematography. I love that we weren't on a widescreen. At first, I was kind of like about it, that it wasn't taking up the entire screen in the movie theater. But then, and when you read what Emerald said about it, the writer and director, she says it's that you're kind of peeping in, which it totally is. And it fits perfectly with the themes of the movie. And it almost puts you in the position of the main character.
Yeah.
Like, in a way, you're kind of watching something maybe you shouldn't be.
Yeah. And you're witnessing things that you wouldn't be unless you were at places that you shouldn't be.
Right. It almost kind of makes you
a peeping Tom.
Just as bad as him. Like,
yeah.
you know.
And yeah.
And I loved the acting.
Mm-hmm.
As much as, and we'll get into this, that the women in the movie aren't a main focus.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into it. I think, what are their names? Allison and Rosamund, I think, did a fantastic job. As much as, is it Rosamund?
Rosamund Pike.
Oh, sorry. Allison and Rosamund. You know why I think of that way? Because of The Robber's Bridegroom, the musical. Her name is Rosalind, so my brain goes Rosamund. Anyways, that's another really messed up movie if you want to go watch it in a different way. No, but they both did some like fantastic performances.
Yes,
they were great. I loved both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I was obsessed with Allison's character, Venetia. Like, I just think she was so perfectly icy, but, like, personable.
Yeah. And it could have been, like, it is totally pushing on that, like, satire of, like, posh English people, like, the elite British, whatever, like, that would send their kids to Oxford with, like, not a single thought about it, right?
Yeah.
But they could have pushed it to be too satire, too making fun. I don't even want to say it was teetering the line, because it wasn't. It was in a sweet spot. Like, it was perfect.
Yeah, I agree. And I also liked that the film was, like, not sexualizing the women, but it was very much sexualizing the men.
Yeah.
And I also think that's, like, a flip on how women are usually portrayed, and which we'll get a lot more into this as well. And, like, this also reminds me of, like, why I said I love the wardrobe, because, like, Emerald herself said she loves using linen in, like, film, because she likes to play with light, where she'll frame it a certain way so that when a character is passing by with a linen shirt, there is light that's flowing through and you see the outline of their body. And something about Jacob Elordi in a linen shirt is just so
British Jacob Elordi in a linen shirt.
Damn. We were big fans.
Big fans. We were talking, actually, okay, let me kind of finish my thing and then we can get into that, because I feel like it's going to be a big one.
Okay.
My con.
Oh, yeah. That's what started this.
We didn't even get there. My con is that the ending pacing, the pacing of the movie as a whole, didn't have a problem with. When we get into the kind of final act, the pacing was a little weird. And I think I would have appreciated the very, very last scene, which we'll get to in the spoiler version, a lot more if the couple scenes before it were slightly more condensed. I was not, there was a few at the end that were dragging, but as a whole, it didn't drag for me. No. It was just at the very end, I was like, okay, we can get there. We can get there. We can get there.
That was pretty much my only con as well. But for me, it didn't really take away from the rest of the movie. Yeah. Which is why I still give it a really high rating.
Do we have anything else little before we get into it? Oh, The one thing that was weird for me that threw me slightly was that it's set 2006. They give you a big banner that says class of 2006 at the top. And we're entering it on Oxford. So of course they're going to play God Save the Queen. Wrong. You know what they're singing in the background? God Save the King. Why? Why?
Explain, Emerald Fennel.
That's what I want to know, because it was so subtle. You could barely hear the like choir voices singing it. You could tell it was God Save the King. And then I didn't notice until like a little bit later in the song when they're saying king, and I was like, what a choice for 2006. I almost want to know if there was a reason or if it just kind of happened that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that felt a little strange, and I know that's so nitpicky.
So specific.
But I was like, we don't have a king at this point.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Miss Elizabeth Gurley. But
Miss Elizabeth Gurley.
but why? I'm like, that was a little strange for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is it because we're kind of looking in from like our perspective? Like we have a king now, we're looking in on something that happened? Maybe.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
But yeah, that was just interesting to me. I think I'm like the only person on the face of the planet that's upset about that, but I'm a little upset about it. That's why I gave it an 8, Emerald. No, kidding.
Do you want to talk about the whole Sam Levinson?
I kind of do.
Comparison? Okay, okay.
So the reason we got into this, this is our second time filming this, but because we could not process our words properly.
Yeah.
But so we were talking about how I was like never super into Jacob Elordi before. Elordi? Elordi?
Jacob Elordi?
Jacob Elordi before. Because obviously, like many people, my introduction to him was Euphoria.
Oh, it wasn't the kissing booth?
Actually, no, never seen it. I love myself too much. No, okay. But I tried Euphoria. I was like, I wanted to be a part of the hype. I could not force myself. And then The Idol came out. I literally didn't even try because I just from trailers and videos and clips I'd seen, I was like, this is not for me. Mm-hmm. My little bit of a gripe with Sam Levinson's work is that it's very much just from the perspective of like male fantasy, and a lot of the themes to me feel like we're either looking in on like the degradation of women, mm-hmm. weird relationships between minors and adults. I'm just not super into that personally. I don't know about you guys, but not my thing. And just like that is, whenever there is something sexual in Euphoria, it feels like it's just degrading. That's what it feels like to me.
Degrading, and it feels like violence.
Yeah.
it's not compelling or sexy in any way. It just, mm-hmm. and there's so much explicit content about minors. Yeah. You know, like the actors are not, but all the characters are, and I just am like, it just feels so unnecessary. Yeah. And it exactly, like Sam Levinson's work, especially with nudity and sexuality, it's not human. Yeah. It's not grounded, and it just purely feels like male fantasy.
Yeah, like blown up, like to the nth degree. Like it's just, it's a little icky to me. Like that's mm-hmm. what.
And with this film, Saltburn, I feel like it was so dark and perverse, mm-hmm. and it was very compelling and, dare I say, sexy. But it wasn't like, it still sexualizes its characters. Yeah. Like I feel like there's multiple shots, like fan service almost, mm-hmm. but it wasn't degrading, mm-hmm. and it was like, oh, I don't know how to explain that. There's just such a difference, and it's so much more tasteful, even if what is being shown is like the most perverted thing you've ever seen. Yeah. It's crazy how much that can like change my view on an actor, because I never understood the hype of Jacob Elordi before, because mm-hmm. I put it in this
I put him in this box of like Euphoria, which I didn't really love. And now seeing him in this, and especially British, I was like, I get it. I'm here with all of you now.
Yeah.
I have entered the room and I'm there.
Yeah. He's actually like such a good actor. Like when you watch him in Euphoria, he was so good in playing whatever his character's name is.
I literally could not tell you.
Yeah. Anyways, his character in Euphoria, he's just so good at being that dick, like that asshole guy, that I almost went into this expecting his character to be similar, like kind of like, you know, like not like exactly like him, but I just fully expected to go into it not liking Jacob Elordi and his character.
We get this kind of sweet side of him.
Yeah, like even though there are still things about him, Felix, that I'm like red flags, but you're still like, he's so sweet, and I did not expect that.
Yeah,
and I just feel like this movie, like, you just have to be such a good actor to be able to do this film. And
especially Barry Keoghan.
Especially Barry Keoghan.
Things this man was doing, the fact that I didn't not believe him for a second, like I was right there, and I left the theater and I was like, there must be something wrong with that man.
Because he was the perfect weird little freak that you have ever seen.
I know.
And he was so believable in it. Like, he was too good. And
too good.
And I loved it. I loved it. I remember we left the theater and we were like Barry Keoghan committed to this film. And
literally,
she was like, I'm terrified of him. And I was like, I want to be like him.
Amy was like, I want to work with this man. And I was like, I don't want this man in a 5-mile radius of me.
I want to work with this man because I want to learn everything that I can about him and how he acts and his process and how he does things, because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It is terrifying how good he is.
Yeah.
And like, I've seen him in other films, and everything I've seen him in, he's completely different. Like, he is a character's actor, and he's so good. Have I mentioned that?
No, do it one more time. I don't think
he's so good.
I think we kind of discussed this earlier, and I don't want to like super rag on Euphoria, but it's a good comparison because of the kind of tropes of like sexuality and these characters that you see. And with something like Euphoria, it feels grimy. With this though, I totally think it is a satire on posh English and like all whatever. I think that's the obvious answer, is that's what this is. I think it is also completely a satire on male sexuality. I think why it is a perfect satire is because it's not just you sitting there and watching this male sexuality play out on a screen in front of you. It's you sitting there as like a 22-year-old woman going, why do I understand this? Why do I get it? Why is this making me feel this way? Like, it's so disgusting. Yeah. But like, and I'm not gonna give anything away, but the scene in the bathtub with Venetia, not the other bathtub scene. There's many, actually, weirdly enough. The scene in the bathtub with Venetia, that's as far as I'm going to go right now.
Yeah.
But we were sitting there, and after we left the movie theater, I turned to Amy and I was like, I get it. Like, I understand why that happened.
Yeah. And I feel like Saltburn kind of is like how people would purely act on like their desires, and they're just like based on their primal feelings.
Yeah.
If you were to take like this critical thinking out, even though everything about Oliver was very meticulous and planned out, and it was very much critical thought, it was also just like purely based on like impulse.
Right.
And it was just so dark and depraved. And
yeah. And it's this blown up movie version of it, right? Like, obviously we have the ending where it's like, okay, this isn't real life. But the parts of it that are so like disturbing and disgusting aren't, you just kind of
get it.
Like, I don't know. And that's going to sound so strange when you watch this movie and you're going to, like, especially if you're listening to this before you see the movie, you're going to go and watch the movie and be like, what is wrong with these people?
Fucked up.
But I think it's just actually such a good take.
I just feel like it really flips it on men. I feel like men were the victims.
Yeah.
Because of a man and his desires and his pervertedness and his obsession. And we're so used to seeing that played out on women. And for the first time, like, I don't want to finish that sentence because that's kind of like spoiler.
Yeah, it's okay. Before we watched it, I saw a lot of reviews that said, like, oh, there was, like, I heard about the gay undertones and this and this and this. I don't think it was. I don't think it was, because, again, I don't want to spoil it, but it did not feel like that was the message that she was trying to get at all.
No.
I don't think that was what that was.
I think the characters themselves, there's a few that are definitely like,
sure.
Yeah.
It is not framed around that in any way, shape, or form. It is truly like what is happening inside of Oliver towards everybody
else. Yeah. And you're seeing, it's like a window into his desires and perversions.
Really, truly, like, you're seeing his, like, pervertedness come out. I want to say there's only one time where it's actually reciprocated, but not really. This is going to sound wild, but there's no, like, sex in this movie. You know what? Like,
and it's never shown in that way, but the movie itself is very sexual.
Yeah. Like, even our scenes with Venetia, there is no, like, reciprocation happening ever, really.
Yeah, sort of.
Do you know what I mean by that? Like, I know that's a weird way to kind of frame it, but, like, do you understand what I'm saying?
I think so. We can expand on it.
Okay.
Because we've been talking for a long time, and this is actually just still spoiler free.
Well, the only thing left that we didn't talk about in this version is the rating.
Oh my god! So this movie fully is like rated R, as it should be, except
only in America. Because Canada said, bring your 14-year-old.
It is 14A,
it's 14A
in Canada, which is wild. Fully knowing that everything that we have just talked about, this movie is 14A here. You can take your 14-year-old to go watch this movie.
And we haven't even gotten into it. Like,
you really shouldn't.
You can only imagine what we're about to talk about. Actually, no, you can't. You actually have no idea. If you haven't seen this movie, you have no idea. But we looked it up, and people were saying, like, it's because Canada is kind of more lenient on language and sex.
But we're also, this was our assumption. Like, the States, whenever I think of it as like a church state.
Right. Like, I mean, there's definitely more religion in numbers. And
religious influence.
Yeah.
Like, in every sort of public way.
Yeah. But like we were saying, like, I can understand if we were just talking about, like, language and, like, sexual content in general, but I just feel like the nature of the, like, sexual content that's happening in this film isn't just like your 14-year-old is gonna know what sex is. It's like it is like if you went into the depths of, like, the most perverted man that you can think of, if you went into the depths of his brain and pulled out, like, something that should never be seen by the light of day, and then put it into a movie, do you want your 14-year-old to see that? No. It's not. That's why I say it's not sex. It's not.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's not.
It's something else.
It's anything but.
Yeah, so if anyone sees this and is planning on bringing their, like, 14, 15, 16-year-old to this movie, please, dear God, don't do it.
Do not.
Don't do it.
Don't.
This, it should be R. It should be R in Canada, too.
It absolutely should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This movie should be 18 plus. I believe that.
Yeah. I left and I was like, NC-17.
Literally. I'm 22 and I'm too young. No, I'm kidding.
So that has been our spoiler free. From this point on, you have been warned. It is full of spoilers. We are going to talk about everything.
We're not holding back. It's about to get nasty, bitch.
Starting from the beginning, you meet Oliver.
Yeah.
And he's awkward. And he's a little weird, like very outsider vibes.
Mm-hmm.
And he meets his friend, the math genius, who I still don't know his name. What's your name, sir?
Michael?
Huh?
Is it Michael?
It's Michael. How did you know?
I don't know. It just came to me.
Oh, well, okay. In this film, you meet Michael, who is the first friend that Oliver makes, played by
Ewan
Mitchell, who, if you watch Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon specifically, he played Aemon Targaryen.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, this man looks so familiar. I was like, he kind of looks like a Targaryen boy. And then I was like, can't be, because it's so different. Like, it's so different. Like, if you know Aemon and you've watched this, you know that those are incredibly, incredibly different characters.
Acting.
So good.
Crazy.
I loved it. I wasn't expecting that. There was not a lot of him in this movie, but I loved every second that he was on screen. And then he meets Oliver.
Nope. Felix. What do you say?
What did I say?
You said meets Oliver. Try again. We didn't talk about this, but I loved the cut scenes. We got a lot of different just kind of cut flash scenes of they weren't scenes that ever actually happened in the movie, and that's why I think I loved it. Whenever we got a little bit of narration from Oliver, and it would kind of flash these scenes of Felix, Jacob Elordi, and it would be him kind of like in the grass, like the wind is blowing, and he's like
reading a book.
He's kind of has this like look into the camera that almost feels like it's the way it made me feel was that it was somebody like kind of recording him on like a little camera, and he's kind of like, that's what it felt like to me.
It feels like somebody who has a big crush on him would imagine him. It's like how they see him in their eyes.
Yeah, like a fantasy.
Like a fantasy.
That's exactly what it was, yeah.
Right? And it's like the whole movie is like narrated by Oliver. We see it from his point of view, so
you're totally right. It's not something that happened because it's in his brain. I didn't even think about it that way.
It's
but
like it's like
totally what it is.
Glimpse into how he sees Oliver.
Felix.
Felix! I keep doing this. Oh my god. For some reason, Oliver makes sense. Like, whenever I think of Oliver, I think of Jacob Elordi. And that's not it.
But I loved those. But I thought they were such a good...
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved them.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, or it could work, because, you know, like, when people say this, like, jokingly, like, oh, do I want to be her or do I want to be with her? Like, haha. I feel like that's what Oliver's relationship with Felix was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the beginning.
Yes. To an extreme.
To an extreme.
Yeah. And so the first time that there's multiple shots where Oliver's character is in the front, and then in the background you see Felix and his friends, and you see them in the same frame, but they're never interacting. Like, it feels very completely separate. I love those scenes because it just really sets it up to when they like slowly start sharing the frame, and they're like, you know, I love those.
This cinematography is like the closest. I'm gonna say this, but they're completely different.
Okay.
But in my brain, this makes sense.
Okay.
This is like the closest thing to like a messed up Wes Anderson. Like, if that's why I'm saying it's completely different, because it is.
It's the
But
symmetry.
do you understand? Yeah, it totally is.
It's the symmetry of
framing and
Wes Anderson has this like very well-known pastel symmetrical kind of like frames where you're seeing landscapes.
Yes.
This is like a zoomed in version.
Yeah.
Like on people, less on the landscape, more on the people, except there's still that symmetry. Except this feels almost gothic to me, like a little bit. And I think it has to do with the structures of like Oxford and the backgrounds and like the estates. Like, something about it feels like modern Gothic, and I love it.
Me too. I love a little Gothic.
Yeah, right?
It's like Gothic Wes Anderson.
In the 2000s.
In the 2000s. People are going to comment and be like, don't talk about Wes Anderson. He's nothing like that. But like, if you understand the vibe I'm talking about, you understand.
Yeah. If you get it, you get it.
If you get it, you get it.
And so the first time that Oliver and Felix really interacts is the bike scene.
Mm-hmm. The way they set him up to be kind of somebody who would get with a girl and then like not talk to her.
That's where I was trying to get to.
I loved it because in my brain I was like, okay, the predictable route is that Felix is a jerk.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where I thought we were going.
Me too.
But we weren't going there, and I love that we didn't go there because it kind of turned those scenes where he was like flaking on these girls and whatever into, I'm going to say this so many times in this, but it's just so human.
Yeah.
Like, and the fact that it was a flaw, but it wasn't like we had to focus on that and be like, what a dick.
Yeah.
It was just a trait of his that really wasn't that bad when you think about it, and it made him so much more well-rounded.
It's just very like college man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know? And like, yeah, like being flaked on and being like kind of disregarded in those ways is not nice for people who feels it. But it's also something, especially with modern dating, it just happens. It's like ingrained in it. Mm-hmm. And like starting with those scenes, we were kind of expected to be like, oh, he's so nonchalant with people. He disregards them. And that's exactly why I was almost like, I feel like this is just going to be another like Nate. I think that's his name.
You're so right. It's Nate.
I was like, this is going to be just like a toned down version of Nate.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
Yeah. Because
the first scene where I was like, oh, that's really sweet.
Yeah.
Was not even at the bar yet. Not that it was sweet. I was like, that's just so like, he's just so likable and very charismatic. It's the first scene when it's at the bike thing and Oliver is like, oh, like you can take my bike and that whole thing. And then he goes, Oliver, I love you. I love you. I love you. And then he gives like his helmet a kiss. And I was just like, that's just a very like charismatic, like likable person. Yeah. And I was like, I can see the allure of Felix to all these other people.
Well, and then we have Farley and Venetia, who kind of tell Oliver like, oh, Felix always brings a boy over. Oh, Felix always has somebody with him.
Yeah.
But then you start to understand that is, well, Farley has ulterior motives.
Yes.
We understand that later. But also, this is the same reason why I don't think that Felix was gay at all. I don't think he was, because Farley kind of sets that up to be like, oh, he's always bringing a boy back. But then we get Felix's perspective on his last friend who betrayed him. And I truly believe that that's why we weren't getting that kind of like loviness towards Oliver from Felix, because it wasn't like that. Oliver was a friend to Felix. Like Felix was trying to replace this old friend that would come to Saltburn with him. Yeah. It was truly like love between two boys in a platonic way from Felix's point of view.
It's like, you know, when it's like those like best friendships between girls that are like super intense and very close, but then one of them is a little bit fruity. And that's like Oliver, but he took it really far. Yeah. That it went so far that it went backwards. And I feel like Felix's character is just affectionate. And we see little moments where like he had tension with everybody. Everybody. Yeah. And I think that sort of the lovey-doveyness was only ever coming from Oliver towards Felix. It wasn't ever really reciprocated in a way. Moving on to the second scene where I was like, I actually really like Felix, was at the bar when there was this thing that happened where Oliver's character had to buy a shot for everyone at the table and he didn't have enough money and he was like trying to talk to the bartender and be like, please let me do this. And Felix comes up and he goes, hey, you dropped this by your foot. I just found it, I almost bagged it, but figured I should do the right thing. And Oliver was like, oh, like, thank you, because obviously Felix is paying for this. And Felix was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And it shows a little glimpse into who he is, because he was also telling Farley to, like, back off and, like, lay off.
And it's interesting when you get to the end and you understand that this was all planned by Oliver, that Oliver understood from the beginning who Felix was.
Yeah.
Before we did.
Yes.
Because he's obviously taking advantage of these likable traits that Felix has that we didn't even understand were there yet.
And it felt like Felix's character truly was a victim, because not only was he, like, manipulated by this person that he thought was his, like, friend, that he was getting really close to, he was also just violated.
Yeah.
Dead or alive. In so many ways, in that he didn't even know.
That's why people watching our unspoiler review are going to be like, what's wrong with you? Because the things that Oliver did were so deplorable.
So vile.
So disgusting, like with Felix's grave.
Yeah.
And I'm not sitting here being like, this is okay.
And on top of that, let's just talk about, okay, we're like jumping into like more towards the
That's
whatever.
fine.
But can we just talk about how messed up it is that not only does Felix kills.
Nope.
Not only does Oliver
You're really struggling, hey.
I am. I keep mixing them up. Not only does Oliver kill Felix himself, he kills him, and then he grieves him on top of his grave and then desecrate the grave by having sex with the
dirt.
The dirt.
Yeah, he did do that.
He did do that.
he did do that.
It started with him lying on top of this freshly buried grave site.
Yeah.
Where Felix is buried under. He's on top of it, crying, fully crying, grieving it, and we're like, oh, like, this sucks. Because at this point, we haven't seen that he killed him.
I'm about to totally disagree with you in a second, but keep going.
But then, you know, it was really, not only do we see him, like, do it, it's like him moving his hand down and, like, positioning it. It was so explicit.
Yeah. Well, to what you were saying about, like, we didn't know yet that he killed him and all of this, and I think I saw, like we were talking about how there's, like, either 5-star reviews or 1-star reviews. I saw one where somebody was talking about how, like, they were just so appalled by Oliver doing that to his grave. But the reason I'm kind of like on that is because it was so entirely expected to me. Right? Like, that was not shock at all. That was not shock value. It was disgusting. Like, and I had a reaction to it where I was like, I can't believe anyone would actually even do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That's one of those things where you're like, people in real life wouldn't do that, right?
Hopefully
right?
not.
Like, you know what I mean?
Right?
Answer me now, right? No. But it wasn't shocking in the movie because I feel like by then we kind of understand Oliver's pathology.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because I'm someone who grew up in, like, you know, we like grew up in a time where it's like you're 12 and you have Omegle, you have Tumblr, you have all this stuff. It's like I feel like from a very young age I've understood like how depraved male sexuality can be. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe like you know how people always say like, oh, Gen Z's so desensitized?
Yeah.
That I'm like,
it makes sense.
That's why I think it's such a good satire on that, because it's like, this isn't shocking to me. I think it's such a good commentary on commentary.
Good job. It came to you. It flowed out of you.
I think it's such a good commentary on that, because it's like something that I feel like people aren't going into, but it's so prevalent. Like, there are so many things in this world that I feel like the root of is male sexuality.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's bad at all. Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is, like, there's male sexuality to that degree.
There's always an extreme to everything.
Right. Yes.
And
yes,
we're
yes.
talking about, when we say it in a bad way, we're talking about the extreme end of the male sexuality.
Right.
Not to say that male sexuality in general is bad.
I think there's just an extreme that it can get to that female sexuality does not.
And this is where everything that we're seeing and witnessing Oliver through is the very, very extreme end of this perverse sexuality of his.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's why I'm like, it was disgusting, but it was so... I just want to be like, Emerald, thank you for, like, telling the story, because I've never seen anyone, like, touch on that topic in that way.
Yeah.
Because it's always from the point of view of it's, like, from a man.
Yeah.
It always is.
It is, and it's always on women.
Exactly.
And this movie flips it. That this is what we were talking about earlier, that the true victims in this movie that were at the hands of Oliver's pervertedness was Felix and also Farley. And, like, there was a whole scene with Venetia and Oliver where, do we even want to get into it?
We don't have to. It's fine. You don't have to. You don't have to.
Okay. That whole scene, it was still consensual.
It was, yeah.
She was into that, and she wanted more of it because she was back the next day.
Well, and she was pining from it from the beginning. Like, the first time we see Venetia, she's like
lounging everywhere,
and she's trying to get with him.
Yeah, and Elsbeth even said, "Venetia's somewhere lounging, waiting for you."
And all of the scenes that. And not to say that this isn't, like, a violation. Like, if this were to happen in real life, like, it's a total violation of the other person, 100%. But the scenes that were really, really dark and really, really perverted and disgusting were the bathtub scene, the first one, and the grave scene. And the thing that I think is so different about them is nobody else was there.
He was doing it by himself, to himself, for himself.
Right. Like, yes, both of those scenes were a violation of Felix.
Very
both
much.
Of them.
Yeah.
But the thing that makes it different is that Felix doesn't know. Yeah. That's what makes it so something that you've never seen before, because all of these things that we see over and over and over again is it's a woman being victimized usually, or, like, in the case of Euphoria, it's a child or, like, a teenager, male or female. But this one is it's like you don't actually see that person being victimized.
No,
that person has no idea that they are. It's that person alone.
Truly living out fully what they want to do. And this is where that whole peeping thing comes back, because we're really seeing somebody at their primal perversion doing their thing, and we're witnessing it, and it's like, I shouldn't be here, but I am.
That's why when they were, like, Jacob Elordi and Barry Keoghan were doing interviews, and they were saying, like, we want people to leave this theater and be disturbed, but also kind of turned on and kind of, like, disgusted, but kind of this, and you know, talking about this. And I think Barry Keoghan was like, I want people to get into the car with their friends and
say, what the fuck did I just watch?
No, he said get into the car with their friends and never talk to their friends ever again. Like, I want you to go. He was like, don't go to this movie with your best friend because you're never going to talk to them again after. That was funny.
Yeah.
But I think that's the reason, is it's like, we're not sitting there watching, like, a woman be brutalized.
Yeah.
Again and again. I understand at first when we left the theater, I didn't understand why they said that, because at first I was kind of like, wow, that was nasty, you know? Like, and that was my first thought. And then I kind of thought about it and I was like, I understand why it could be taken that way in a way that you almost get it. This is wild.
Yeah.
I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth.
And it's not even that we're defending Oliver. We're not.
No.
in any way. But it's
He was
just like
nasty.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that's why I say that this is that's why I give this movie like 9.5. I might even teeter to 10 because I just think there's so many. You can keep getting just deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And there's so many layers that you can peel away, or you don't have to. You can just stay at the top, and it still doesn't change the fact that this movie makes you just have to sit with it and be like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah. I think for me, the baseline is that it's a perspective that I've never seen before.
Absolutely. And
on something that I so desperately, like, I didn't even, it's one of those things that's like, I didn't know I needed it until I saw it.
Yeah.
It's like a perspective on something that I didn't know I needed. And then I saw it and I was like, wow, this was so needed.
Yeah.
You know why I think we see Felix in that way is going back to those like
glimpses
is because we are seeing Felix through Oliver's eyes, but not at the point in time that we are watching it. We are seeing Felix through Oliver's eyes after death. So he is going back and he's not in that. Oliver is not at that moment in that state of like, he's not in that state of like disgusting perverseness. He's reminiscing about what he remembers about Felix.
Yes.
So we're not seeing Felix in this like disgusting sexual way that he probably was at that moment. We're seeing this reminiscent, nostalgic, beautiful sense of Felix.
Like where he has taken himself out of the equation.
Exactly.
He's just, oh my God, yeah, you're right.
If we were seeing it from the perspective of Oliver in 2006, it would have been it probably would have been degrading, honestly. It probably would have been. But we're not. We're seeing the perspective of Felix from future Oliver, who is thinking about him in the past.
And has removed. I just have to bring up the friendship between Elsbeth and her friend,
Pamela,
because that was so painfully funny to me. Like,
were they friends though?
I think they were friends in the way where people are just friends because they've been in each other's lives for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think their friendship is one of those in a way where Pamela is obviously very much relying on all the privileges of Elsbeth, and Elsbeth is just like, she's entertaining. Yeah. Like she's chaos. She lives this like such quaint little life. Yeah. And like everything Elsbeth says that is meant to be a compliment is still a slap in the face.
She had some perfect like one-liners. Like, well, after Pamela dies, and she literally goes, she'd do anything for attention.
I died laughing.
She delivered them so well.
Yeah.
Rosamund Pike delivered them so well.
This was a scene when she was talking about how she was moving into like a studio apartment, and she was like, oh my gosh, I did that. Like, it's just so much easier to clean.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I loved her character because she was like a walking bitch, but it was like one of those where you were like, she's so bitchy and cold-hearted, and that's why I want to be friends with her.
But like lovable. She was lovable. Yeah. She was so lovable.
People are still benefiting from her and her privileges. The only, I guess, the consequence of getting those privileges is her tongue. I think it's so funny.
You know what scene I want to talk about that I loved, but I didn't love at first?
Yeah.
Is right after Felix dies and they all go eat lunch. Because at first I was like, what a wild thing to do. Yeah. But then I was like, no, this makes so much sense. Yeah. Because I feel like in movies, usually someone will die and then we get a cut scene to the funeral and then we get a cut scene to what happens
after. And they're grieving.
But when you actually think about it,
you don't know what to do with yourself.
Well, no, like when your son dies in the maze outside and the police and the coroners are dealing with it and you have nothing to do. You can't just stand there and be in their way. What are you going to do? You're going to go try and fucking eat lunch.
You're going to try. It's like you're trying to have some semblance of a normal life, like normalcy in your life, but you obviously can't do it because there's this big looming grief that is there, but it's not like
It's not grief yet.
You haven't processed it.
Yeah.
You don't know how to handle it. So you're just like, I have to get ready for lunch.
At first I was like, this is wild and this is weird. And then I was like, no, because this is so real. Like,
This is
what?
so human.
It's so human.
Like, it's just, I feel like you were just seeing people in the rawest of forms.
Yeah.
In this movie, and that's what I loved about it.
And we have that moment where, and it's comedy. So of course we have the moment where, oh my God, Venetia is pouring the entire bottle of wine all over the table because she's just so like entranced in what the fuck just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And Farley tries to excuse himself, and the dad just says, sit down and finish your lunch. And he's like, my lunch was cold like 2 hours ago. Like, we've been sitting here. But it's just so like, I just loved it. It's like, it's the same thing that I have been saying this whole time. It's like, one, something I've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
We never get scenes of like, this person just died 2 seconds ago, and we just have to pretend like, it's like,
We just have to still live and go on with our lives.
like life doesn't stop.
No.
You still have to eat lunch.
It's the same scene, but the part that really like put everything into perspective was when you hear the coroners like wheeling Felix out. And everything, it's so like sickly quiet, and everyone is like realizing what is happening, but they're trying so hard to like not even ignore it. They're just trying to be normal, but you can't, because you know that your son's body is being wheeled out by coroners, and you just hear this creaking wheel where it goes
And Farley's losing it, and Venetia's just like so
Sobbing.
gone.
Yeah.
Like, she's just not even on this planet anymore. And then the parents are both just like,
yeah, and then you just have Oliver go, this is really nice. This is really well done.
yeah, and Oliver's being a freak. Like,
Yeah.
he is. Like, and that truly was one of the moments where you see Oliver for who he really is.
Yes.
That, like, everyone else is having this moment where they are just in total, like, ruin.
Yeah.
And Oliver's just like,
He's processed it.
he processed it the moment he slashed his tire. Like, this was
Yeah.
the whole plan.
Everything.
Of course.
Yes, he's ready for it. He's prepared.
Yeah. I think, honest to God, I think that was maybe my favorite scene in the entire
I
movie.
think so too.
I
I
loved
think
it.
it just had. I think it really perfectly puts the movie in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Where not only is it dark and fucked up, it's also funny.
So funny.
And it's
So real.
so real and so painful and sad, but you can't stop laughing. And it's just so, like, that scene just makes you feel so many things. And that's all I can say about this movie, is that it takes you on a fucking emotional journey.
It does, truly, yeah. And then you have the butler who is like, he comes in and he's like, the coroner will be wheeling him past the window, so I'm just going to close the blinds.
The line when he's like, the police keeps getting lost in the maze. Can we get someone to help them?
And it's the fact that they live in this like posh world where he has to ask permission for everything, but then you have somebody who is sitting at this table trying to eat lunch, and he's asking, the police are getting lost, can I let the gardeners take them through? And he's like, do whatever you want. Like, why are you asking me
The
this?
fact that they have a maze in their front yard. Yeah.
And then do you have anything to say about the very last scene? The very last scene,
It was swinging everywhere.
it is like,
It was a character of its own.
it's Oliver. He finally has the entire mansion to himself. He has murdered the entire family.
Yes.
And he is completely naked, and he's dancing to Murder on the Dance Floor, which, by the way, perfect song choice.
Right?
And
He is completely naked, and you get a full frontal.
yeah, for like 3 minutes straight. Like,
Yeah.
it's,
Because he's like dancing, and you just follow him.
yeah.
It was just like unrestrained, uninhibited joy that he was experiencing.
Which is just wild.
and like freedom
Yeah.
that
When you take that and parallel it to Oliver's parents and their house. When we first meet Oliver's parents and you realize that Oliver's not poor, he has a loving family, he has siblings.
His father's not dead, his mother's not an alcoholic.
They made a meal for them, they've been waiting for him, they're doing all these things.
They were so relieved to see Oliver.
And then you see him dancing around this mansion naked in like total just like freedom and joy.
Yeah, and it's like you see him and it's like he's experiencing that for the first time, and it is absolutely,
well, I think it just makes it so much worse. It's like you could have that if we had taken out the element of Oliver's family, that scene I don't think would have been as impactful, because you don't see the comparison of like, he should have been happy.
yes,
Like, this man had no reason to be unhappy,
to be the way that he was,
other than the fact that he is like just totally and completely mentally depraved. Like,
yes, yeah, exactly.
Those two scenes contrasting really make that last scene so much more impactful to me.
Like, everything in Oliver's life that was holding him in any way was like created by himself.
Totally.
And he was like, there was a scene where, okay, not even that yet, but the scene where Oliver and Felix are at his house and the parents are there and we're meeting them for the first time. Felix is acting in that scene. So funny. I loved it. You know, when your whole world is falling apart and you can't believe what's happening and you're angry and you're confused and you're heartbroken, but you just have to be like having the best time of your life and you're overcompensating for all of it. He was so perfect in that.
That also shows, again, like, the fact that Felix was such a good person, because he's been totally lied to. Everything that he believed about Oliver has just fallen apart in 2 seconds, and he still is like, you know what, we'll stay for lunch.
Yeah, he's not about to ruin this experience for Oliver's parents.
If there was like a physical embodiment of positive masculinity and toxic masculinity, it is Felix and Oliver.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
I just wish, that's my only con, is that I wish we had gotten to, I wish they had kind of condensed some of the, I don't know exactly which scenes I would even want, but some of the scenes before.
That's where I was struggling with, because I know what you mean when you said like the end was like a little bit draggy, but I was like, I felt like all the scenes fit.
That's why I'm saying, like, I don't know what exactly I would even want to be different, but something about it slowed the pace for me, which I think made that last scene less enjoyable.
That's fair.
And that's all. That's my only thing that I wish, which is pretty good to only have one thing that I like would change about this movie. I think there's also such a thing in my brain where I'm like, what does it take for somebody to do a scene like the very last scene where you were completely naked, flinging things around, dancing around for 3 minutes straight, and knowing that that is going to be seen by millions of people?
Not only that, when you're filming it, it is probably in front of a crew of like 100 people.
Right.
With lights and cameras following you. There's just such like a confidence and also commitment that, and like just a removal of like just society.
Right. Like, you have to completely remove any thought about people watching this and judging it and
any social barrier,
whatever,
to and that's
just
why,
wild.
And that's why I would love to work with him, because I want to learn everything that he has to offer.
Yeah.
Like, because like, not saying that that kind of character in Full Frontal is the type of work I want to put out.
Yeah.
But the quality of work that this film has in acting, directing, in every aspect is what I want to be a part of.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it totally redeemed is not the right word because I never had any ill feeling towards him, but it totally, like, I think just shed a new light on Jacob Elordi for me.
Yeah.
100%.
Yes.
It's not that I had any feelings about him at all. It's that I had absolutely none from his other work. I just didn't really, like, care for it, I guess.
Yeah. This movie also just shows his range.
Yeah.
I also haven't seen Priscilla.
Yes.
Which
yeah.
I want to, because a lot of people, like, were saying that when Priscilla herself saw it, she was so surprised by his accent in the film. Like, his, like, regular, like, at-home Elvis Presley accent, because she said it was so much like him. And then, like, Austin Butler did his whole thing where he was... where he had the accent for, like, 3 years and didn't talk to his family for, like, 2 because he was Elvis, you know? And it was just so, like, it's so performance.
Yeah.
You know? It was like somebody performing Elvis. And, like, you know, I've just heard such good things about Jacob Elordi's acting.
Yeah. This one really did it for me.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Yeah. That I was, like, surprised.
Yeah. Anything else?
No.
I don't think so.
You should definitely go watch it.
Just don't bring your 15-year-old.
Don't bring your 15-year-old.
Please.
Don't bring your best friend.
Or do. I mean, we're still friends, so.
Yeah. Are we, though?
Has your rating changed? Because I think mine did.
I'm going to give it a 10.
I'm going to give it a 9. Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
You can find our podcast on YouTube, Flicks and Giggles Podcast, if you want to watch our beautiful faces. If you want to listen to us on the go, you can find us on any streaming platform, Spotify, Apple Music, all the ones. You know them all.
Wherever you listen to at Flicks and Giggles Podcast.
Yes.
You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok.
And that's about it.
That's about it.
At Flicks and Giggles Podcast.
Thank you so much for coming on this crazy, weird, freaky, wild ride with us.
Yeah,
this
and
episode.
Mom, I'm sorry.
I'm not telling my mom and dad about this episode. I'm gonna say we skipped it. So if you are somehow watching it, how could you? I told you we didn't have an episode. I'm sorry. Thank you. See you next Tuesday.